At the end of 1999, Sid Ahmed Rezala hit the point of no return when he threw a living woman off of a moving train. This would be his first victim. But how did he get here? And can we pinpoint the event that created the monster? On an ice-cold night, Karine, 36, and her husband wait on the train platform with their son and their dog. As it pulls up, they all get on and her husband kisses her goodbye and leaves them all on the train. They are on their way to visit Karine's mother, who is sick. As Karine's husband leaves them all in the safety of the train, he looks back and is overcome with the thought of just how vulnerable she is in that very moment. He didn't know that this would be the last time he saw her. At around 2 a.m, Karine squeezes past her silently sleeping son in the carriage to go to the toilet. At 3 a.m, the conductor sends out an urgent message for help. A body has just been discovered in the toilet, and the scene is like something out of a horror film. There is blood everywhere and he needs urgent assistance. The train comes to a screeching halt and police units are rushed in to verify the crime scene and, more importantly, try and catch the killer, who is very likely still on the train. The body is that of Karine Caillot. She has been stabbed 14 times, all over her body, including her face. What is clear from the scene is that she has not been robbed and her clothes are still completely on, suggesting that the victim has not been SA'd. It is a particularly violent scene with no obvious or clear motive. What is clear is that there is a violent killer on the loose. The police begin questioning everyone in the carriage in which Karine's young son still remains, scared and unaware of what has just happened to his mother. One witness alerts to the detectives that he has seen a strange man that looked very agitated. He had been smoking a joint out of the train window. The controller also saw the man. When he tried to check his ticket, it turned out the agitated man didn't have one. So the controller kicked him off the train at Dijon at 2:39. If this is their man, then he certainly is no longer on the train. He's out there walking amongst innocent public. They need to find him fast. He is extremely dangerous. Luckily for these detectives, the controller has taken his name and his address. Sid Ahmed Rezala, 20 years old, from Marseille. An urgent alert is sent out across France to begin the urgent hunt for Sid. Every police station receives the message as he is deemed extremely dangerous. 220 miles away in Châteauroux, an officer reads the message and the name immediately rings a bell. The coin drops. They also have been searching for this man in connection with another murder. But the most bizarre part of this is their victim had also been murdered on a train. The body of a young girl is found on the side of a rail track. She has no paperwork with her and it will soon be discovered that she's not French. Identifying her is going to be quite difficult. Luckily, the detectives in Châteauroux notice something that will quickly crack this case. They see that her watch has stopped, and this will be the key to tracing the young lady's identity. Her watch stopped at exactly 4:10, and on this stretch of countryside, the detectives realize that the train from Limoges to Paris passes at exactly 4:10. The girl must have been thrown from the train, her watch breaking on impact. So they check any females reported missing in Limoges. Isabelle Pic had been reported missing after supposedly taking a train to Paris. A young British student, only 20 years old, traveling back to see her boyfriend. A message is immediately sent out to the public who frequently use this particular train route to come forward with any information that they may have about Isabelle Pic on the night of her disappearance. They quickly get the info they need. Isabelle had indeed been spotted by witnesses at Limoges station. She had been chatting to a young Maghrebian man at the platform in Limoges. They got on the train together and sat in a quiet section of the train, alone. They are able to create a digital image of the man last seen with Isabelle. And when they match the physical characteristics with every person on that train, they get a small list of names. This is a list of suspects in the murder investigation for Isabelle Pic. Among the names is Sid Ahmed Rezala. When the coroner results come back, they discover that when Isabel had been thrown from the train, she was still alive. Only an extremely deranged man would be capable of such a heinous act. The realization that they are dealing with no ordinary murderer hits them. Sid is an extremely dangerous man and he is walking free. Sid was born in 1979 in the north of Algeria, El Bayar. His dad had been a policeman, then became a mechanic. He was a good school student and a great basketball player. But his mum, slightly concerned with his shy nature, decided to send him to the Scouts. It was at the age of 9 when everything changed. Sid suffered a horrific trauma for which he would ask for help but receive none. He became a very different kid. He went from a shy guy to a difficult student, and he would often be disciplined but nothing would work. His downward spiral had begun. The severely traumatic event had changed him and there was no going back. In 1994, Sid, his parents, and the other siblings decide to leave Algeria to move to Marseille to escape the civil war. Sid was immediately enrolled in school here but would rarely attend. He preferred to spend his days on the streets where he became friendly with some bad kids in the neighborhood, quickly getting involved with drugs, alcohol, and petty crime. In 1995, in a secret underground location, Sid would commit his first horrific crime. Hidden beneath the St. Charles train station, he threatens a young boy 13 years old with a knife. He forces the boy to perform illegal explicit acts. This is the first time we see what he is capable of doing. He is caught and put into a prison for young offenders for 18 months. I don't know about you, but this just doesn't feel like the right amount of time for the crime. On top of having a rather light sentence, during his time in jail, he is described as being aggressive towards the prison guards and frequently smashes up his jail cell. Then, in a shocking turn of events, a prisoner comes forth with some damning information. One day in the shower room, Sid had allegedly forced himself upon said prisoner. An investigation is opened into the incident, but with little evidence, the case is very quickly dismissed. He is let back out into civilization. Once he is out, he immediately commits more crimes and gets caught for stealing a watch, for which he serves 100 hours of community service. Nothing else. It is at this time he develops an obsession with trains, riding with no ticket all over the country and sometimes even further. In March 1988, a police officer refuses him entry into the restaurant at the train station. Sid attacks him with a knife and the officer is injured. Then in just a matter of months, he attacks another train officer who is trying to stop him from pickpocketing the passengers. He is condemned to prison for 1 year in February 1999, but he is let out just a couple months later in June. When the prison guards are asked about his behavior, they said honestly that he was dangerous, unpredictable, and always on the edge. Equally, during these few months in prison, multiple other prisoners came forward to report him of SA, but there was never enough evidence to pursue legal action. He is deemed to be a high-risk prisoner due to all of the complaints. Nevertheless, he is let back out into society. When he is let out, he moves to Amiens to be near his ex-girlfriend Nadia and his 1-year-old baby daughter. His ex-girlfriend Nadia had broken up with him when he had been thrown in prison, which had left him heartbroken. So maybe for his daughter, or maybe in an attempt to win back his ex, for whatever reason, Sid takes a stab at starting an honest career. He begins an apprenticeship in baking, and we love our bakeries in France.
Marie! The baguettes! Hurry up!
And according to his bosses, he was the best apprentice they had. He's really making an effort to straighten up his life, but he still has a fascination with trains that he just can't shake. He is obsessed and he gets caught and reprimanded for traveling with no ticket on 42 different occasions. Then he makes an attempt at joining the French Foreign Legion, which is a corps of the French army allowing foreign nationals to serve for France. But unfortunately for him and his future victims, he is refused entry. The refusal is not based on his criminal record, but surprisingly, it is based on the scars on his arm from a moment during his time in jail where he attempted to leave this world. With this rejection, his criminal activity accelerates. He is about to become much more reckless and dangerous. and we are about to witness the beginnings of a monster. In a 3-month period, he will go from being an average thug to being public enemy #1. His first victim we already spoke about. It was young student Isabelle Peak, thrown from the Limoges-Paris night train at 4:10 in the morning on the 13th of October 1999. His second victim goes missing on the 29th of October, just a couple weeks after. But her body won't be discovered until months later in December. Emily Bazin met Sid at the university campus in Amiens. He knew her since he was a dealer there, and he would sell her and her friends marijuana. And during this time, they also had a brief fling. But at the time Emily goes missing, she was dating a different guy, and it was a guy that Sid considered to be a real good friend, like a brother. One day on the campus, Sid saw his good friend crying. And when he asked why, he discovered that it is because of Emily. He was heartbroken, and Sid knew exactly how it felt to have his heart broken. The empathy Sid had for his suffering friend was resounding. So much so that he wanted to avenge him. He wanted to make things right. And that was why he had killed Emily. However, it wasn't premeditated. He had not even thought about doing it until he had found himself in the right place at the right time. He is having a conversation with Emily and is suddenly overcome with an internal rage, and he sees a vision of Emily's lifeless body. That's right. Sid explained that the impulse he had to kill was always delivered to him in a dark vision. He called it a flash. A gruesome image would flash into his mind as he was talking to his victims, followed by an uncontrollable urge to make that vision a reality. Sid would eventually reveal these dark inner thoughts in the most unusual of circumstances to a journalist named Aziz Zemouri. But we'll come back to exactly how that happened in just a minute. When the coroner results come back for Emily, it shows that she had been beaten and then strangled to death. They also find traces of Sid's DNA inside of her. But what could not be determined was whether it got there through a consensual act, as Sid claims. She is found in Sid's basement. She had been there since her disappearance more than a month earlier. The French police force launched an urgent manhunt operation in which they will collaborate with 13 other European countries and 3 other North African countries. But to their misfortune, there is a leak. The press get hold of the story, and although the police specifically asked the media not to publish any photos of their suspect, they do. An article is splashed all over the newspapers with a big photo of Sid, alerting the public to the operation that is underway to find the train killer. To complicate things further, a journalist reaches Sid's parents' house in Marseille before any detective. Greeted at the door, he asks them if the train killer is home, but Sid has allegedly just left. This will prove to be the sloppy beginnings of a very messy manhunt. It is on the 15th of December when Sid sees his face in the paper, and he knows his game is up. The police have linked all 3 murders to him. He is now a wanted man, so he quickly plots his escape. He flees towards Spain. With little time to plan, he has to steal to get by. In Spain, just days before Christmas, he is stopped and arrested and placed in a jail cell. Great! Christmas has come early. It's 1999 and Spain has caught the murderer. That's the end of it, you might think. But no! After 3 days, he is released. His name was on Interpol's wanted list at the time. Spain was one of the countries France was collaborating with. So the reason they released him is very unclear. It is speculated that he managed to hide his real identity and he was released before the truth was uncovered. Or perhaps the police in Barcelona forgot to run a background check on him. In any case, our serial killer train fanatic has been released back into the public, and he is heading towards the Portuguese border. His parents, who were unaware of his antics before the newspaper publications, publicly ask him to give himself up on the 28th of December. But it's going to take more than that to convince him. He's traveling under a fake name, Aki, and he is doing a pretty good job of lying low. In Portugal, he meets a unsuspecting 42-year-old man named Armando, who he fools with his new identity, and they begin a short love affair. Armando lets him stay at his home. There would be no way for the French police to find him here, until he makes one little mistake. His greatest weakness will be his downfall. He reaches out to a friend of his in France to get news of his baby daughter. The friend immediately alerts the French police, and they rapidly geolocate the number to Portugal. When they track it, they find that Sid is staying at Armando's house in the outskirts of Lisbon. They are determined not to lose him this time. The Portuguese work to set up a perimeter around the house, and then they begin to move in slowly, making sure that there is no way out for him this time. He is captured and placed under arrest on the 11th of January 2000. And in his pocket, they find a one-way ticket to the Canary Islands, which was dated the day after his arrest. They caught him just in the nick of time. Things are about to get even messier. Down in Portugal, the process of his arrest comes to a grinding halt. Life imprisonment was against the law in Portugal, and since he was inevitably going to face a life sentence when he went back to France, Portugal would not let him be extradited. It was against their laws. So the French are flipping out. They finally promise that they will not sentence him to life in prison, but rather they would give him 30 years max. It is only then that Portugal allow him to be extradited to France to be sentenced. This process, however, as you can imagine, with hundreds of legal back and forths, has taken months. But the decision is finally made on the 24th of May, and this is when they begin the transfer process, but that too will take months. Whilst this legal battle is playing out, something happens that has never before happened. It is outrageous or genius, depending on where you stand. Sid has not yet been interrogated by French detectives. The investigation had been overshadowed by the legal pandemonium. So this is where our young, scrappy and hungry French journalist Aziz Zemmouri seizes his opportunity. Aziz, like Sid, is of North African origin, and he uses this connection to bluff the prison guards into believing that he is one of Sid's relatives. A relative come from France to visit him in prison. He's in, and he is about to get an explosive exclusive. In the interview with Aziz, the journalist, Sid talks explicitly through each of his murders. Question after question reveals a full confession for each of the 3 murders. He even confesses to other crimes that were not known to the police. And he also opens up about his childhood trauma, the trauma that had changed the course of his life and forever deeply scarred him. When Sid opens up about Corinne, he admits that he didn't know her before that night, and he just wanted to rob her, but things got out of hand. He had drunk 2 liters of Jack Daniels mixed with marijuana and pills. He saw the famous flash during his attempted robbery, and he felt obliged to stab her to death. He didn't even end up robbing her, and he states that if he had known she had a son, he would never have done it. And when he's talking about Isabel Peake, he describes her as a sweet girl. They had got to know each other at the station, and he proclaims that he is always a gentleman. If you were cold, he would take off his jacket and give it to you. It was something that his parents really loved him for. And so Isabel that night had asked him if she could borrow his phone to call her boyfriend, and he lets her. She even took a draw from his joint. It was all going well until Sid had another flash. He threw her from the fast-moving train and she died on impact. When he's talking about all of these murders, he seems to be filled with remorse. But people have questioned whether the flashes or visions are just a way of passing the buck, a way to justify his evil crimes whilst not taking on any accountability. When Sid had been just 9 years old, he had been the victim of a horrific event. A night of abuse from multiple perpetrators, each of them taking turns with him. 7 or 8 of them violently abusing him. All of them men from his neighborhood that he knew between the ages of 20 and 30. This eternally scarred him. Was this the moment in time that the monster was created? A child being exposed to such a horrific collective evil. He stated in his interview that these kind of things would often occur in his neighborhood, but to speak of it would bring shame on the family. And when he told his parents of the event and exactly who the perpetrators were, well, they couldn't help him. They did nothing. So life went on, except his path had been forever altered. At the time, the journalist Aziz worked for a popular French magazine called Figaro, and the article is published before any interrogation or trial takes place. Just weeks after the interview on the 28th of June 2000, before Sid is shipped over to France to be sentenced, he starts a fire in his cell. But this night happens to be a particular night in the world of football. The guards are busy watching this very important match. It is the European Cup and it's the semi-final between France and Portugal. Due to this, the guards do not notice fast enough. When they see the smoke coming out from underneath his cell and try and open the door is blocked. He's blocked it by a bed. When they finally get in, they try to revive him. He's still breathing. But that evening, just after 11 p.m, Sid is declared dead from smoke inhalation. Now the jury is out on whether he did this to himself to intentionally cause harm or whether he had done it to get the attention of the guards who were extremely distracted. However, a letter to his family is found in his room. J'ai tout perdu dans la vie. Il me reste que à le rendre au Créateur. Sid became known as the train killer. Our thoughts and prayers are with Corinne, Emily, Isabel, their loved ones and their families. Rest in peace. If you are the victim of a traumatic event, know that there is help out there. Our parents and families may want to help but are often not trained in victim support, so you may want to consider reaching out to a professional for help. With that being said, please take care of yourselves. Merci, à la prochaine. Bisous. Seems like every time you guys are subscribing, there's a tiny earthquake. But, you can keep doing it though. Thank you. Bye.